Okay, my name is Jocelyn Whalen. My pronouns are she, her, and I am the Quick Resource Facilitator with the Kawartha World Issues Center.
And I'll be co-facilitating this presentation. My name is Malika Collette, and I use she, her pronouns, and I'm Program Facilitator here at Quick. Back to you, Jocelyn.
Thank you so much. And thank you, Shaylin, for sharing that in the chat. Shaylin and Margaret are here also this evening. They also work with the Kawartha World Issues Center, and they will be supporting us with the tech this evening. If you have any issues at all, please send them a message on the Zoom chat. Also, if you haven't done so already, feel free to introduce yourselves in the chat. It's a good way to get to know each other in this virtual environment. First of all, I would like to acknowledge that the Kawartha World Issues Center is located on the Treaty 20 Mississauga territory and in the traditional territory of the Mississauga and Chippewa Nations, collectively known as the Williams Treaties First Nations, which include Curb Lake, Hiawatha, Alderville, Scugog Island, Rama, Beausoleil, and Georgina Island First Nations. We respectfully acknowledge that the Williams Treaties First Nations are the stewards and caretakers of these lands and water in perpetuity, and that they continue to maintain this responsibility to ensure their health and integrity for generations to come. As we discuss climate action during this presentation, we should give our gratitude to Indigenous communities and reflect on the work they have done and continue to do so today. We will not achieve climate action without centering Indigenous knowledge in our work. You are now invited to include the Indigenous territory that you are currently situated on in the chat as well, if you would like. Before we get started, I just want to talk a little bit about Quick. The Kawartha World Issues Center is a charitable organization that connects global issues to local initiatives. We create opportunities that change how people understand the world and foster equitable and sustainable communities. We make change happen through three key program areas: community education, youth and school programs, umbrella support for small and emerging projects. Thank you very much. Next slide, please.
Next slide, Margaret. Awesome, thank you. Thank you so much for everyone for joining us tonight. We're really looking forward to this presentation and some interaction with all of you as well. So recognizing the Global Day of Climate Action taking place this Friday, March 25th, we wanted to host an online event that was accessible and not only hopeful, but also helpful to bring together the climate community in Nodojiwano and Peterborough. So thank you to those of you that filled out the Doodle form that we shared this week and last week in a bit of a social media campaign ahead of this event. We're really excited about this presentation where we'll give an overview of where we're at internationally and locally when it comes to climate change and discuss some key areas within climate change and how they're addressed locally. And finally, we'll have an interactive Jamboard to share some ideas and connect with one another before we wrap up. We'll also be distributing this slideshow that we are using tonight, as well as a Word document with all the links that we've mentioned tonight. So you see things now with all of you through the email you used to register for this event. Now, before diving into this discussion, it's important to recognize the war happening in Ukraine right now. Fossil fuels and natural resources are at the root of this and many other wars and armed conflicts happening around the world. Climate change and transitioning off of oil is interconnected, and these armed conflicts, and it's important to remember these intersections. As a community, our thoughts and prayers are with those experiencing war and armed conflict, as well as our efforts to bring about global change. Europe, the United Kingdom, and many countries across the globe are currently looking to cut their reliance on Russian oil and gas this year. Gas prices are skyrocketing, and many are turning to coal or imports of liquefied natural gas as alternative sources. While others fuels, especially when it comes to the reliance on for transportation. This just proves that a just transition to more sustainable forms of energy would benefit everyone and is needed now more than ever before. Next slide, please, Margaret. Now, before zooming into the local picture, it's important to recognize where we are coming from on a global scale. Although the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic, Russian-imposed war, and more has continued to dominate mainstream media lately, the climate crisis has persisted. In recent weeks, Australia has experienced intense flooding that have hit Queensland and New South Wales with extreme amounts of rain, creating Queensland's worst flooding since 2011. The floods even resulted in Prime Minister Scott Morrison declaring a national emergency to speed up aid efforts. This hasn't happened in Australia since the fires we saw in 2020. Global South and marginalized communities are being hit with the impact of the climate crisis on a daily basis, though they are producing the least emissions and receiving the least media coverage. Kenya has and continues to experience flooding across the country, to name just one example of the disasters those in the Global South are faced with. On February 28th, 2022, just last month, as many of you may have seen, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, or IPCC report, released its most recent and, as scientists put it, bleakest report yet. A report that once again reminded us of the emergency and how and if immediate action is not taken. We saw reports that everyone will escape dire impacts. The global population live in highly vulnerable areas to climate change. Mass die-offs from trees to core underway, and 1.5 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels is a critical tipping point. However, instead of letting this report throw it despair, doom, and surrendering fighting, it must catapult us into action. We must let our anger and fear fuel more action than ever before, because there's no better time than now to begin and continue taking action. These reports can often be hard to comprehend, fully understand, and acknowledge the scale of the damage that's being caused. And discussing it's not always easy. So it's imperative that we take the time to process these reports before coming back to action more energized and ready to win than ever before. Next slide, please, Margaret. Now that we've now acknowledged some of the international disasters, let's zoom in a little bit more to the national context, because it's important to recognize that so-called Canada is no longer safe from these disasters either. From record-breaking temperatures 3 days in a row this summer, to then the complete destruction of Lytton, BC in the fall, extreme flooding washing out highways on both the west and the east coast. This past year has shown us that this country, a small glimpse of climate change. With the extreme heat came droughts and lack of crops in Alberta. So it's clear to say that Canada is no longer a country that will experience climate change only in the future. Next slide. Now zooming in once again to the provincial level of Ontario. The Ontario government currently has a target of reducing emissions by 30% below 2005 levels by 2030, to give some context on where they're at. 7 youth, including Shaylin from Quick, who's here with us tonight, are suing the Ontario government for its weak climate targets. 30% by 2030 is not in line with what scientists have said is necessary to reduce emissions to stay on track. These 7 youth and their lawyers from EcoJustice will be in court the second week in September to urge the government to strengthen its climate targets to align with the science. So the link has been or will be put in the chat shortly for a petition supporting that climate case. So if you haven't already signed that and are interested, please do so to be part of this historic case. I'll now pass it over to Jocelyn.
Thank you so much, Malika. Unfortunately, I'm sure that most people here have felt the effects of climate change within your community. The effects of climate change have definitely been noticeable in Ngoja for several years. There have been historic extreme weather events, such as you can see pictured here, the flood in 2004 and the heat wave in 2018. I was in the area for both of these extreme weather events, and I have seen the effects that it has had on this community as well. It has been predicted that we will see warmer summers, shorter winters, warmer nights, and increased participation on average in this area in the upcoming years. Considering the risk from severe weather events, some neighborhoods in Ngojawinong are more vulnerable to the impacts of flooding and persistent heat waves than other areas of the city. Malika mentioned earlier marginalized communities, and some of these areas that are going to be affected the most are areas of low socioeconomic standing. Adapting to Ngojawinong and other areas in the world to withstand extreme weather that is projected to become a normal occurrence is important and also very costly. I would like to invite anyone who is interested to add in the chat any experiences that they have had with climate impacts in their area. And if you're from Ngojawinong, also please share anything that you've experienced if you're comfortable. We would love to hear from you in the chat. Next slide, please, Margaret. Climate action is goal number 13 of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. It is pivotal in directing and supporting all of the other goals of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals that include peace, equality, and prosperity for the entire globe. Climate action is seen around the world through government action, education, youth, nonprofit, and grassroots organizations. And this slide here, we have provided some important background information. These are all hot linked so that you can reference them after the event to learn more about relevant government legislation and other acts that have been put into place by government affiliated groups. Next slide, please.
We're now going to discuss a few areas in which climate change connects. So a few different kind of sectors within the local community and different pieces within climate change to discuss where the gaps are and where action is being taken and share some of these groups that are working on it right now. So first up is education, the most powerful tool in the world, what changes our lives every day we step foot into the classroom and what can help transform the world. Education is such an incredible resource when it comes to tackling climate change, because the number of students that teachers are educating, however, within the education systems that are preventing them from their full potential. When it comes to teaching about climate change, it's often not given the priority or attention it deserves. We've often experienced or heard that it's left till the last few days in the high school science unit, but that's just one class. And we don't believe that climate change is a one subject issue. And again, it's not that the students, it's often that the teachers aren't being taught. And that's why it's not being brought up in the classroom enough. So there's clearly an education gap where this is not being taught about. So as you can tell, young people are not learning about climate change in school. They're having to learn about it outside of school, at events like this, in the community, or on their own online. Yet schools are meant to be the place that prepares us for the future. Yet the most important issue of our future isn't being discussed there. This is a big issue that is not receiving enough attention. Young people deserve to be taught about the issue that will define their future, and they want to learn about its implications, solutions, and how to take action. So what's being done to address climate education, both in schools, but also in the community, because education is a lifelong process. First up is TRACS, which stands for Trent Aboriginal Cultural Knowledge and Science. It's an educational program based out of Trent University within the Indigenous Environmental Studies and Science program. It's a partner with QUIC and the First Peoples House of Learning. TRACS consists of two distinct and connected another Leadership in Sustainability Program, or YLS for short. Some of you may have heard about it. YLS is a one-semester high school program that is focused on the environment, focused on climate change, and providing the solutions and empowering young people to take action. And it is a program for grade 11 and 12 students in the area. And so this program is educating students in a way that every classroom should be, taking them out into the field, into the community, hands-on learning that will prepare them for their future. Yet students shouldn't have to leave the classroom for this kind of learning. And popularity for this program is continuing to grow each year and truly having an impact on students in the area. Now, for teacher candidates is the Eco Mentorship Certificate Program. Again, based out of Trent School of the Education and run in partnership with Camp Kawartha. This incredible program is an annual Eco Mentorship Certificate Program for teacher candidates. This program shows future teachers how to integrate outdoor activities and nearby green spaces into their teaching practice and how to infuse the Indigenous roots of environmental education into teaching, what all teachers should truly be learning about, if you ask me. And here at Quick, we work on education in a variety of different ways, specifically with our Sustainable Development Goal workshops in local classes, most recently on UNDRIP. For our grandchildren, it's another incredible local organization that hosts monthly educational events for the public on a variety of topics. And finally, lobbying with the local school boards, working with the system that has the power to change these gaps, has and continues to take place. Just over 2 years ago today, before the pandemic overtook priorities, simultaneous delegations were made to both local school boards. PVNC, the Catholic board, was supportive and worked with students to integrate their asks and work with them in the board. While KPR, the public board, sent it to senior administration. Discussions are now, meetings are being held with KPR trustees to continue this work and push them farther. Education is a crucial part in tackling this issue that cannot be overlooked. Many groups, including the few mentioned here, are doing incredible work on climate and environmental education. We must all work to support these groups and push for systemic change in the education system. And feel free, I think some already are, but put groups in the chat that we missed. We know we can't cover them all in this one presentation. Just chose a few here tonight, but please share other groups that are working on education in classroom or out of the classroom in any way. Next slide, please, Margaret. Next, climate action and politics. Politics, a word many of us may sway away from unless it's voting day. Others may be deep in it following political action day in and day out. Although it can be and is messy, often frustrating and hard to find hope in, it's important that we recognize the impact that politics can have when fighting climate change. Politicians alone are not going to, but they do have a role to play. Now, to put it into perspective, we have 8 years until 2030 to cut our emissions in half and prevent the worst impacts of climate change, a deadline that's often talked about in the climate. So to put that, this year, it is only 3 municipal elections, and happening this fall and 1 happening in 2030. Laterally, it is only 2 more scheduled elections based off of the recent announcement, subject to change depending on the next government. But when we put it this way, we can see how clearly the choices we make in electing our politicians matter, as they'll be in power for roughly 1/3 of the amount of time until this crucial climate deadline. Thinking about that we only have 2 or 3 governments left in all 3 jurisdictions until this deadline. So when we think about who we're electing and the power we're giving them, it holds a lot more weight than we might think initially. So as I'm sure you all know, this election is June is the provincial election happening in Ontario. And many issues are likely to be top of mind for voters this election. But let's hope that climate is one of them. Premiers and the province have more power than we might think when it comes to climate and environmental regulations. So it's up to every one of us to do everything we can to ensure that the candidates we vote for are going to support strong climate action. Likewise, in the city and county of Nodo-Juvenong and all municipalities across the province will be up for election in October. And it may often seem as though the smaller the jurisdiction, the harder it is to make change happen. But I see it as the smaller the jurisdiction, the easier it is to make this change happen to get that change you need to push through and have the conversations with those people that represent you. Climate action has been lacking from politics for years now, but we simply don't have any more time for it to not be the election issue anymore. So I encourage everyone here tonight to get involved with the upcoming elections in some way, even if that just means talking to friends or family members about it, or maybe even volunteering for party or events around the election. It all makes a difference. And let's remember that politics is only one avenue for change. Yes, politicians hold power, but as people, organizations, and citizens, we hold power to create change through other avenues too. So don't lose hope on politics, but do consider the importance of climate change when it comes to politics. Over to you, Jocelyn, for the next slide. You're muted, Jocelyn.
Thank you, Malika. Climate action and climate emergency declarations. A climate emergency declaration is an acknowledgement specifically that humanity is in a climate emergency and that urgent action is required at this time. There are currently 517 municipalities and counting that have declared a climate emergency in Canada. Some of these cities include Vancouver, Halifax, Kingston, Hamilton, Charlottetown, Mississauga, Oakville, Edmonton, Whitehorse, and Toronto. The city of Peterborough declared a climate emergency in 2019. There are also educational institutions like the University of Waterloo that are declaring climate emergencies. Next slide, please. Thank you. So climate action and divestment. Fossil fuel divestment campaigns emerged on campuses, specifically in educational institutions in 2011, with students urging their administrations to turn their investments in the fossil fuel industry into investments in clean energy and communities that are most impacted by climate change. By 2015, fossil fuel divestment was reportedly the fastest growing divestment movement in history. In 2021, a total of 1,485 institutions representing $39.2 trillion in assets worldwide had begun or committed to a divestment from fossil fuels. That sounds pretty good, doesn't it? We have to thank the organization 350.org for all of their work that they did with their Go Fossil Free, Divest from Fossil Fuels campaign that they started in 2012. I think it was really influential on this movement. And it called for colleges and universities, as well as cities, religious institutions, and pension funds to withdraw their investments from fossil fuel companies. Then Stanford, Harvard, MIT, University of Glasgow, University of Toronto, University of British Columbia, universities from all over the world decided to divest from fossil fuels or are in the process of divesting from fossil fuels. But McMaster students are currently urging their university to divest and will be walking out of class on Friday, which is a very special day, as we all know, in support of divestment. They're taking it into their own hands. The university does already have a carbon neutral plan for their investments, as well as they've done work to advance the UN principles for responsible investments, but the action is lacking. So there will be a demonstration on Friday, supposedly. I also want to mention that cities, faith organizations, and investors worldwide have also divested from fossil fuels. Yet, Canada's 5 biggest banks are among the top funders of fossil fuels in the world. Since the Paris Agreement that we talked about earlier, that was signed in 2015, Canadian banking giants like RBC, TD, Scotiabank, BMO, and CIBC have continued to pour over $720 billion into climate destroying fossil fuel companies. Sustainable Trent, big shout out here, is a volunteer-run student group at Trent University that advocates and takes action for sustainability, Indigenous rights, and environmental justice. They have urged Trent University to divest from fossil fuels for several years, but no action has been taken yet. You can check out their fossil-free and Divestment 101 campaigns that have been very successful. Next slide, please, Margaret. As you can see in this photo, youth activists on the front lines of the climate crisis are pivotal, and they are some of the most change-making advocates in the world right now. And at COP26, they were on the front lines of the climate crisis for an end to inaction. They urge politicians and business leaders to do all that they can to meet the goal of capping global heating to 1.5 degrees Celsius. Tens of thousands of protesters marched to the streets of Glasgow, Scotland, to demand the urgent measures necessary to tackle the climate emergency. Now moving on to climate justice. Climate justice is a term and more than a movement. It acknowledges climate change and that it can have differing social, economic, public health, and other adverse impacts on underprivileged populations. Some incredible movements to date in climate justice include Land Back. Land Back is a movement that has existed for generations and organizes to get Indigenous land back to Indigenous people. Currently, there are land back battles being fought all across Turtle Island. I Don't Know More is another one. I Don't Know More started in November 2012 in Manitoba, Saskatchewan, and Alberta, and they were protesting the Canadian government's dismantling of environmental protection laws. I don't know how many people remember that, but that was a really critical time. I Don't Know More was led by women, and it's a movement with Indigenous people and non-Indigenous allies that are working for Indigenous rights and the protection of the land, water, and sky. The Peterborough chapter of the Ontario Public Interest Research Group, also known as OPIRG, and I saw it was mentioned in the chat earlier. Thank you. This organization provides space, resources, and support for students and community members to develop activist and transferable skills while working on social and environmental issues necessary for meaningful social change. You can also see on this slide that there's hot links to OPIRG and also to some of their working groups, which include Black Lives Matter, Nogojiwanon, the Trent Queer Collective, Amnesty International, and the Free Market. All really amazing groups and very successful in the community and doing a lot for change and for the climate as well. There's a couple more there. There's the Diverse Nature Collective, which is a local BIPOC-led organization dedicated to creating space for conservation-minded folks to help empower and mobilize diverse voices. There's also a BIPOC growing collective in Nogojiwanon that was started in the last few years that is currently operating out of the Trent Vegetable Gardens. It's important to recognize that those doing the least to cause climate change are often hit the hardest. That includes, but is not limited to, Black, Indigenous, and peoples of color, and those in the global South. Climate justice must be centered in all climate work, as social justice is climate justice. We'd love to see other examples of climate justice groups or individuals that are working on climate justice in the chat if you would like to share. Next slide, please. Thank you. So climate action and transportation. As most of you might know, globally, transportation accounts for between 15 to 20% of greenhouse gas emissions each year worldwide. Efforts are being made to reduce this, but is it enough? Car manufacturers are developing and promoting electrical vehicles, and scientists are exploring alternative fuels like hydrogen fuel cells. As an individual, you can research travel options, and you can actually investigate your own carbon footprint, which we've included a carbon footprint calculator here on this slide. That can be really informative, and it's pretty easy to use if you haven't used it before. For short distances, you can walk, you can ride your bike, That's usually the best choice for low to no carbon emissions. Public transportation like buses, subways, and trolleys are also a good choice too. The city of Peterborough is creating a long-range master plan to guide the future of transportation citywide. They surveyed local residents to shape the plan to ensure that it reflects the considerations of those who live, work, and play in the city. This is also a question of accessibility, if everyone had accessibility to this survey and if it was properly distributed to everyone, but it can be a good guide to transportation and more sustainable transportation methods in the city. Let's see what happens. Bike. The Peterborough Community Bike Shop is a great nonprofit, charitable, member-based cycling education and support organization. They've been working with the Peterborough community since 2006. They're very well known in the community as well. Some of the things they do, they teach bike maintenance, repair, and riding skills. It's a very beautiful community. Green Up is also another well-known organization in the area that we are affiliated with. They have their transportation and urban design programs that are really great. They aim to build a community that through its design supports and encourages the use of active and sustainable transportation options. Their programs strive to provide encouragement, education, experiences, and examples that motivate and inspire a shift in transportation choices. Over to you, Malika.
Thank you, Jocelyn. Now, to highlight one recent event, because we know it's been a while since we've done in-person actions, here are a few images from the recent Just Transition action that took place just over a week ago at MP Michelle Ferrari's office. This action was one of 50 actions across the country calling on the federal government to follow through on their promise of implementing the Just Transition Act. Although it can often seem lonely or hard to organize alone, it's important to remember that there are so many others out there, and especially in this community, so many like-minded folks who care just as much about this issue as you do. So this was just one action. It was so nice to be out in person again, to highlight this action that happened simultaneously across the country, calling for this Just Transition Act to finally be implemented as promised. And we'll talk more about another upcoming action shortly. We're now going to pivot and do a bit of connecting with one another using a Jamboard. So we'll put the link in the chat for it. Do that right now, but everyone will have added access to this. And if you haven't used Jamboard before, you'll open it up, and on the left side, you'll see a little toolbar, and one of them will be a sticky note. And we'll share this up on the screen in just a minute. So thank you, Margaret, for all of your tech support. But we just want to start by asking these questions. So the first one that you'll see on there when you open that up is, what areas do you think need support or should be a priority in Nodo-Gionon in the area? So maybe there's something coming up, or maybe there's this council meeting coming up that you know really needs attention that isn't getting it. Exactly, so we start seeing them come up. So just that little sticky note feature there on the side, and you can type your answers in. And if you're not able to use Jamboard or not comfortable using that, feel free to type your answers in the chat as well, and we can add them on there, or just say them out loud, or put up your hand even, and we can answer them like this if that's easier for you. But we really just want to connect with those of you here. It's not a giant group, so let's just kind of talk about where do we think the priorities are? Where can we be focusing as a climate community right now?
I've been seeing some really good things in the chat as well. Thank you all so much for participating. And if you want to add any of that to the Jamboard, I'd also like to open it up. If you want to use the raise hand function, you can share, you can add to the discussion verbally as well.
Seeing a lot on water issues, protecting water and wetlands, wetland protection. Yes, really important. Waste management. Monday, 28th, So assuming this coming Monday, City Council meeting about the cycling master plan. Thank you, super important. So this coming Monday, a meeting to watch out for. Assume that'll be streamed virtually for everyone to tune into or sign up to make a delegation. Cycling advocacy to City Council again, yes, super important. Protecting green spaces and forests, yes, definitely. Seeing in the chat, water protection, climate is the movement of water, yes. Indigenous rights, green waste collection, housing retrofitting. Yes, so many great points here. Diversity and inclusion. Safe and affordable housing, listening to Indigenous voices, not just performative, but working with them, listening to them. Yes, absolutely. So many great answers. I think one that I would add in personally that I see as a priority coming up is these elections. So seeing what we can do locally with this upcoming provincial election, especially, and a little farther down the road to municipal. But so many great issues here I'm seeing.
Just before we move on, does anybody have anything they want to add or expand upon just before we move to the next question?
Yeah, feel free to unmute yourself to put up your hand.
Safe and affordable housing stuck out to me. Just because of the socioeconomic status and that vulnerability that we talked about earlier. And it's a huge issue, I'd say nationally, globally, but it's a huge issue in Nogojawanong. I see water protection in the chat. Climate is the movement of water. Thank you, Anne. Consultation with the most impacted groups is lacking. Absolutely, Robert.
Do you have your hand up, Robert? You want to go ahead?
Well, it was just started, but yeah. What I was going to expand that a lot of times it's not, there's no walking groups. The consultation is like sent out to everybody in the city all at once, and it doesn't seem to be focused enough.
Yeah, thanks for adding that. Ness, do you have your hand up?
Yeah, I wanted to, I guess, like, not mirror, like reiterate sort of what was said before about questioning the accessibility to the surveys and things that have been put out to the municipality regarding planning and stuff like that. As someone on the cycling advisory committee, like, I know that with the making the official urban plan for Peterborough, which was just, I think, finalized a couple months ago, yeah, the accessibility to the surveys and the input, I don't think was really that great. Like, they put it on the official Peterborough website, but there wasn't really a lot of advertisement about it, and especially not like to people who are not permanent residents. There's a really, really big kind of ignoring or discounting of people who are not necessarily permanent residents or homeowners. And there seems to be a pretty, like, they don't really know how to go about getting information from those people who are not permanent residents, basically. Like, there's sort of some kind of, yeah, they're struggling with being able to figure that out. And I'm like, just send a mail survey. Like, just put one in every mailbox in Peterborough. We do it with like our annual census. Like, it's not that hard. So I do think that there's like a real like skew probably are biased in the information that they get for those kinds of things. And they're also, it's very, the demographics that responded, you can see are like very specific. It's like a lot of like middle to older aged people that have lived here for over 25 years, that kind of thing. So I think that there definitely needs to be more effort to reaching out to other communities generally, across the board for like all of the municipal planning related stuff. There's like not enough like effort to like really outreach and send out like information about needing participation from like all communities. Really, that's like a really big issue.
I completely agree, Ness, and I've seen that across that board with consultation. A lot of the times it's just a box that people need to check. That's in environmental science, government, all different levels of government, all different development companies. I've seen it really across the board where consultation is done in a way that is biased and that isn't inclusive. So absolutely. Thank you so much, everyone, for pointing that out. And in the chat, I see it's been added to the Jamboard as well. I'm so glad you brought this up, that the common minimum plan to mitigate climate change at a household level. What that says to me is that a lot of the times climate action has been on more of an individual level. It's been this type of, I don't want to say greenwashing, but telling others that you must do these actions in order to save the environment, that it's up to you. And then that minimum plan level, absolutely. Would you like to expand on that?
Oh, well, basically, we have already a very interesting system for waste management. And then nothing is perfect, right? But at least we have some plan right there. And what I am thinking at this point is if there is a directive based on scientific facts that particular compounds can be collected in recently I was attending a talk by the polyethylene recycling group from California, from the Silicon Valley. And if the municipalities can give some directions on collecting the polyethylenes alone in a bag and put it, and that can go directly into their recycling plant. This is like an upgrade of what is being done at this point. Okay, and also there can be separate collection for the clay-based materials like glasses and chinas and things like that. This would be like they can have a rebirth very quickly. So that is something which and this is just a tip of the iceberg. And I'm a novice in this field, but this has been bothering me for a while, and I just thought there's a platform for me to mention that, and I would mention. By the way, I am at Trent, so if anyone is there at Trent, they can feel free to come and talk to me. I'm at physics department, so.
That's wonderful. And if you want to introduce yourself in the chat as well, that would be lovely. Or share any information that you'd like.
Yeah, my name is Balaji Subramanian, and I'm a professor of physics at the Trent University. My research is based, basically I'm developing this devices which facilitate the heat control from inside the house to outside, or from outside to inside the house, those kind of things, smart windows, we can call them as. I do not know, I still have to do a lot of research on how that is mitigating the climate change, but that is something which is very close in that direction. Okay, so that's about it. And you can come and see me at, in case if anybody wants to meet me, I'll just put my contact at the chat, and that's about it. Thank you very much.
Perfect. Thank you so much for sharing. I think you brought up some really important facts about the, there's already, the science is there, and the development's already there, but the money isn't being invested into it. We do have a lot of other alternatives that aren't being used as well as they could be, or even talked about. And I think that's a really important point. So we have about just under 15 minutes left, and I'd like to leave a little bit of time open for discussion and just wrapping up. So maybe we'll do another 5 minutes on the Jamboard. There is two more really good questions. So maybe we just want to go to the next question. I think this is a really important question because I've seen a lot of important information coming through the chat about this. So where do you want to get involved in Ngojuwanong, and where are you already involved? And this could be, you can share information about different groups and organizations that you're involved with and different work that you're doing, or work that you want to get involved with. And this could be a really good connection builder as well with the group. So I'll give everyone just a couple minutes. So you just scroll to the next question up at the top, and I'll just give you a couple minutes to put any information there that you want, or we can have a quick chat about it as well.
Yeah, so if you're already involved in organizing, maybe if there's an upcoming project or something you're excited for, an action, an event or campaign your group's working on, or maybe if you're newer to organizing an area that you're interested in, you know, maybe it is transportation you're looking forward to getting involved in, or waste management, or what kind of areas you're really excited about coming forward or are interested in learning more about. Awesome. I'm seeing OPERG, Transition Town, Purple Onion Festival, the Youth Climate Action Club, which we'll talk about in a minute. Super exciting. Peterborough Bicycle Advisory Committee, Bike, as we talked about. Lots of different groups. Anyone else have anything? Again, feel free to put in the chat or raise your hand if if that's easier for you.
I see there's a shout out that Transition Town Peterborough Green Zine is looking for volunteers specifically to help with WordPress and social media. If anybody's interested, that's great. And in the chat, I see here, if you're interested, or you are interested in developing teachables for the basics of climate change. That is, I feel like there's a lot of organizations in Peterborough that that are doing that type of work.
Oh, then that's good. Thanks.
Absolutely. And everything will be hot linked in our presentation that we will be sharing with you all. So you can look up those.
Yes, you could put me with those groups. I would like to participate. So.
That's so great. I think that's the most important thing, in my opinion, is getting involved with different groups and organizations in Ngojuwanong. There is some really great work happening, and it's also a great way to build community and meet some really great people.
Yeah, as we mentioned, we'll send out links to all the groups that we've talked about afterwards. So we'll send out our slides in a document so that you can connect with those that we've mentioned.
Yeah, excellent. Thanks.
And they're always looking for people. Always places to get involved. Maybe we can go to the last question. I think we have a couple minutes just to do that. What upcoming actions are you looking forward to? If anybody wants to answer that, I'll just give 2 minutes to do that.
Yeah, I guess kind of similar to the last one, but if there's something you're excited for coming up, maybe some events again, or different things that you're working on, if that wasn't already covered. I always love to see what people are excited about and looking forward to, and we can talk about hope and in-person events again and connecting with our community in ways that we haven't necessarily been able to do. Yes, the strike this Friday, absolutely. Purple Onion Festival, the Glow Ride with Bike, awesome.
I'm also going to download this Jamboard and I'll share it with you all as well, because there's some really great mentions.
Yeah, we can share this Jamboard, and we might try and use some of these generic answers without using personalized information for social media, or to share with everyone on what we can do.
Yes, I'm so looking forward to the Global Day of Climate Action on Friday. Okay, that looks great. Thank you so much. So I think we can switch back to the slideshow, please, Margaret. And yeah, I don't see many more coming in here. If you do want to keep adding to the Jamboard, please do, because like I said, we'll download it and send it to you all.
I see the Eco Justice Ontario hearing and the dates there for everyone, September 12th to 14th, happening in Toronto. So to keep a watch out for that. And some more resources that we'll just share with you in the slides afterwards. So we can go, we can go to the next slide there, Margaret.
Wonderful. So, sorry, I just added this into the slideshow. These are just some other groups that I wanted to mention in our Jamboard session that some of them were already mentioned. Sustainable Peterborough is a good resource. They have a good list of organizations in the area. And for our grandchildren, great organization. Trent Oxfam is actually, we partner with them. Transition Town Peterborough, that was mentioned tonight, amazing organization. The Peterborough Regional Farmers Market, this is the market downtown Peterborough. Lots of local farmers and really great produce there and products. Autonomy Conservation is our local conservation authority, and Future Majority is an active group globally, potentially, I think nationally. They're a really great group to get involved if you want to get involved with politics, especially youth action with politics. They're quite active in Nagojawanan. And next slide, please, Margaret.
Yeah, and we've mentioned it here, and I know there's a few members of the group here today, but we do want to point out for everyone attending the strike this coming Friday, March 25th at City Hall, that the Youth Climate Action Club is organizing, happening at 3:30 at City Hall. There's going to be speakers, chants, and more. Please do wear a mask if you're coming if possible, and bring a sign. It'd be really nice to gather and get in person. So if you're able to come, or if you're able to spread the word, it's going to be a really great event to gather once again as part of a global day of action around the world with hundreds of other actions. So really looking forward to that and hope to see some of you there.
I'm really looking forward to that. Are there any questions, comments, or discussion? We only have a couple minutes left, but if anybody has anything they'd like to bring up now, we would love to hear from you.
Yeah, you can use the chat or raise your hand again on the Zoom function as well. If anybody any questions or something you wanted to bring up to the group, I'd be happy to do that.
Okay, great. Next slide, please, Margaret. Thank you. So thank you all so much for joining us this evening. I feel like there's some really rich discussion and some really good connections were made here this evening. I hope that everybody follows up on their climate action and their different connections that they made this evening. Events like this can really bring people together. And I hope you learned something, or I hope you got to connect to the information in some sort of way. I'd like to thank everyone who helped plan the event and the campaign so much. Our wonderful Quick team, including Margaret, Shaylin, Sarah, Ali, Ryan, and Alyssa. Thank you all so much for all the work that you did on this event and the campaign. Thank you to everyone who joined in our climate action campaign. If you got the chance to do that, we used your answers to form this presentation. So very grateful for your participation. And please visit our website for more information and to get involved with us. That is also hot linked in the slideshow. So we will be sharing this slideshow, the Jamboards and the recording of the presentation with all of our participants this evening. Thank you so much. Yes, please sign up for the quick newsletter. Shaylin also put our website in the chat. Yeah, thank you all so much. Enjoy your evening, stay warm, happy spring equinox, and take care of yourselves. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you so much, everyone. Take care.
I'm not sure who iPad was. I wonder. Yeah, thank you all so much for supporting and for everything. That was so great. Thank you all so, so much.
Yeah, great job to you both. That went really well. Yeah.
I feel good about it too. So
yeah, it's good. Some good interaction. So it wasn't a huge group, but I think there was about 20 people there. So pretty good given the ratio of what we've had before. So yeah, it's nice to see people commenting and using the Jamboards and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there's some really beautiful connections there. Just some community building happening. The physics prof, so cool. Yeah, that just made me feel so good. Just people getting involved. It's just so good when you can see involvement in a virtual event. Just really nice.
You want to stop the recording, Justin?
Oh my gosh. Oh no. Oh no.